Hey there, Tear Talk fans. Russ Hamilton here from Keepers of Chaos. So I just had a burning desire to do a video today, and I was trying to think up a good topic. And so I decided that I was going to devote and dedicate this particular video to you guys that are new in the business out there. That's right. I just wanted to touch on some topics that I think will really help you guys and hopefully give you guys something to be able to look at down the line to try and better yourselves and to try and just get on top of the game. All right. So a lot of different terms for the new people out there, new boots, fish, newbies, new jacks. Anyway, down in the comment section, if you guys got something that maybe most of us haven't heard yet, be sure and include those because I'd like to, be up on all the latest terminology myself. But the reason that I kind of had this topic kind of pop into my brain was this tends to be one of the number one things that I get asked or that I see being asked in other forums is someone comes out and they say, hey, I'm starting on Monday. What are some good tips? I'm finishing the academy and I want to know what I should do when I get there on the line. And so, there's a lot of interest in, having some tips, kind of knowing what to expect and some of those things. So I thought I would, just get right into all of those. All right. So anyway, with regards to the tips that I see out there, there's some pretty good tips. There's some really marginal tips. There's some bad tips. And there's also some downright dangerous ones. And so I'm going to take you through just a few of those real quick before I get into the next section of this. Whenever I see that, the number one thing that someone always says, and it drives me nuts, is this: firm, fair, and consistent. All right. And the problem with that and the reason that it drives me nuts is because so much of the time it's just left without any framework on it. And you're just kind of left, especially if you're a new person, what am I supposed to do with that? Firm, fair, and consistent. What is that about? Or even worse, sometimes these people that you're talking about firm, fair, and consistent, they don't even understand the principle themselves and they go out to flush it out in the wrong way. Not a good thing. I'm going to run it down to you really quick, really succinctly. All right. Firm, fair, and consistent. I'll let you figure out what those adjectives mean as far as, just in the English language. But the purpose of firm, fair, and consistent is one thing. It gives us guideposts to be able to stay on the path of our professionalism. Firm, fair, and consistent is for us, not the inmates. That is not how we deal with inmates. That is not what we're doing. We're doing that to be able to stick to our professionalism. The inmates are just kind of, a side thing that happens within the body of that firm, fair, and consistent. We do that so we don't lose our jobs, so that we don't end up becoming the criminal ourselves, and so that we don't end up having to pay a price by not adhering to our standards of professionalism. Adhere to your standards of professionalism. Firm, fair, and consistent will happen all by itself. That's all you need to know. I've seen time and time again where I hear, well, you know what? If you treat these guys with respect, they'll respect you and you'll never, ever get assaulted. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. All right. In corrections, there is going to be conflict. All right. There is going to be conflict because the people that you're charged with overseeing, the inmates, right? They're criminals, right? That means they have an antisocial personality disorder. No two ways about it. That means that they're not going to adhere to the same morals and values that you have. So no matter how much respect that you give them, all right, that's only coming back at you as long as you're not doing your job. So I just want to be clear on that. You guys got to understand that corrections is conflict. Now your academy and people like me and Anthony Ganji, and others are going to help you along the way, give you tools to deal with that conflict. Understand, though, that ultimately every bit of conflict is backed up by what? You guys should know this. It's backed up by use of force. Those guys aren't staying in their cells all night, every night, because they've just decided that they're going to get along with society. All right. Everything is backed backstopped by the use of force or the threat of use of force. Now, hopefully we don't ever have to go that far along the continuum, but sometimes we're going to have to. And the idea that somehow you're going to get out of conflict is, it's a fantasy. All right. So let's just get that straight. But you're going to have the tools, or you're going to develop the tools that you're going to need to deal with that. And you're going to learn policy and procedure, and you're going to have the backup that you need, hopefully, and all of that when it comes to that time. All right. So there's no shrugging it off. All right. So the next thing I really want to emphasize, and I'm getting back to that question, to give the best bit of advice that can be given. All right. I'm going to tell it to you right now. All right. And that is, when you get to your institution, when you get to your facility and stuff, there's going to be some guys and gals there that are going to be subject matter experts in particular fields, maybe even several fields. And, it's going to be things like report writing or contraband interdiction, searches, use of force, handcuffing techniques, gangs, whole big cornucopia of different skill sets, knowledge, and training that you're going to need. All right. You're going to go out there and you are going to pick the brains of these people that know these different things that you need. And you know what? If you don't know who they are, ask around. Someone's going to tell you. They're going to say, hey, who's the best person to talk about gangs? And they're going to give you a name, and you're going to go off and find that person and talk to them. Or maybe if you've got an email at work or something, you can say, hey, give me the quick lowdown. And hopefully that person, and oftentimes they will be, is going to be the kind of individual who's going to want to help and going to be wanting to put that type of information out there. And so that's always a good thing. And that is the number one piece of advice that I have to give, which, quite simply, if I just distill it down, learn the profession. All right. Learn the profession. That is what is going to get you where you want to go. Now, that in and of itself is just a strategy. The tactics and stuff, well, I filled you in on a couple of those about, finding those people and picking the brains. Just do that along through your entire career. All right. You've got to learn the profession. So figure out what the tactics are to make you be able to pull off that strategy that you're looking at. So the next thing that you really need to learn when you're new is communication. All right. And once again, this is one of those things where people are going to say all kinds of things about it. It's true. Communication is key. I'm going to give you just a couple of, little tips, little tricks, little observations that I've learned over the years to just try and make this, pan out in a way that you can understand it and you can start applying it. Because it's not enough for me to just tell you, hey, you know what? Communication is great. Communication is key. Be on your way. Okay. That's not going to cut it. So anyway, when I'm talking about communication, obviously the first thing on that list is you have to learn to talk to inmates. All right. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So how do you go about doing that? Well, hopefully one of the things that helps is if you're a little bit of an extrovert. But it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or you don't have a way with words. This is something that you can develop. With some of you, it's going to take more time than with certain other people. Now, that's nothing to worry about. You have a whole career ahead of you to learn all of this stuff. Communication is just one facet. So the first thing that you really want to start doing is you want to start putting yourself in a position where you have to talk to these guys, where you're finding out things about them, where you're interviewing them, whether they realize it or not. Be out there, be proactive, and start asking them questions. Now, not personal questions, because I'm going to tell you, with communication and with learning to do some of these other things that I'm going to talk about, there's risk, because communication is a two-way street, right? You're gonna get something from them. They're gonna want something in return. The deal is you got to be able to just really not give them anything that matters. Nothing about your personal life. Nothing that puts you in a position where you're compromised even to the smallest degree, where you feel you have to have that quid pro quo, where you have to give something back to them. None of that. But by putting yourself in a position where you have to interface with these individuals, that's, getting them to their medical appointment, asking them about where they're needing to go, asking them about, why are you here in this area, or having them come up, hey, let me see your ID, just to learn what their name is. Oh, your name is such and such. You can use that as a basis to strike up a conversation. Now, like I said, this isn't going to be about anything personal. This is just for you to get information, however little, and to start accumulating a knowledge base of how to talk to these individuals. All right. So, it's kind of hard to point out everything that you should be doing to develop that skill. But if you have a problem with it, and there's lots of people that do, you're not going to ever start developing those skills by hanging back and just thinking, man, I'll start tomorrow or the next day or next week. Force yourself. Corrections is about developing that discipline where if you have a weak spot, let's start working on it. All right. Let's put ourselves into a position where we have to start communicating. Put yourself in a position where, maybe you've got a work crew or maybe you can volunteer to run a work crew, even if it's just, for a day or an hour or whatever, where you're starting to give these guys orders and, have them, talk back to you, or they say, oh, hey, you know what? We're going to need to go get the brooms or some paper towels or whatever, so that you can start feeling at home in this environment. Now, that's not to say that we want to desensitize ourselves, because that's going to do nothing but build complacency. But at the same time, we want to develop that confidence so that we're able to just, go out there and start spitting orders. Hey, you guys, go ahead, turn all those chairs up and go ahead and mop the floors. Just leave the chairs up. We'll come back and get those later. Learn to start, being an authority figure, because that is exactly what you are. Okay. The next thing I really want to talk about is, and I really, really want to caution you on this, okay? Because I don't want my words to be misinterpreted, but you want to start building rapport with inmates. Okay. But this is a dangerous thing, because what happens to a lot of people when they start this rapport building, that's all they ever end up doing. They build rapport, and they never get anything back from the inmates, because that's the nature of the game, right? You're going to build rapport with inmates, and then the instant you say no, all that rapport is gone. So then what do you feel like? Well, you feel all your hard work and rapport building just went out the window. Well, that's just the way it is, because these are inmates, okay? I used to have a supervisor who used to drive me nuts, because he was always, we'd take things and he'd give them back, and he was, well, I'm building rapport. All right. That's no good, people. If you're building rapport, it's building rapport to be able to talk to them, in situations where you need to get some type of information, maybe some type of compliance, maybe just to be able to put your expectations out there toward them. But it's never to the point where we're just going to keep giving and giving and giving and just, let that string, that reel off your fishing line go forever. So you have to be careful. You have to not think of it as a quid pro quo, where you are just going to, never put your foot down. This is a way for you to start understanding inmates. But you know what? When it's time to cut it off, it's time to cut it off. And if all of that supposed hard work goes out the window, no big deal. You'll start again tomorrow. Yeah, rapport building, it can be important, but it's not an end to itself. Don't ever get caught up in that mentality. That's how inmates manipulate you. I've got, if you look further on Tier Talk, you'll see a whole video that I did on quid pro quo. So understand that if that's what you're doing at that moment in time, that's the only moment in time that you're doing it. All right. Don't get caught up into that thing where you're rapport building and it just never ends. All right. Because what did I say before? Corrections is conflict. All right. There are going to be conflicts. And there's no sense in just trying to put them off, because all that's going to do is put you in a position further and further behind where you're never going to be able to exert enough pressure until it comes to the point where something really bad happens. And then there's no choice. And then we're talking about a lot of other report writing skills that have to do with use of force or you getting hurt or something like that. So you have to look at rapport building in context. You're going to see it along the way. I guarantee you, probably in your first week, you're going to see someone that's a rapport builder out there. And that's all they do is build rapport, hoping it'll never end, hoping that they can stay on it through their whole career and never get hurt, never make a difference, never be an impact player, never stop something serious from happening. Just have the blinders on. Okay, so let me go on to the next part here, okay? The last of these three things that I'm talking about right in this section is observe interactions, all right? This is really important for you to be able to understand, and I'll get into a little analogy, a little metaphor down the line a little bit from this. This observe interactions, right? You want to watch inmates interacting with each other. You want to watch inmates interacting with staff. You want to watch yourself interacting with inmates to see how they respond to different things, to understand what their stressors are, to understand what their motivations are, to understand what their triggers are, right? Because what this is going to do is this going to put you in a better position to be able to understand the game. Because when it's all said and done, what is this? It's a great big game. And your choice is going to be whether or not you're going to be a pawn in the game or whether you're going to be a rook or a bishop, a queen, a king. Man, too many people too long in their careers for years and years. Sometimes they never get out of it. They stay down there in that pawn thing where they never understand that, you know what? They're just going through it. Blinders on, complacent, dumb. So anyway, let's move on to the next section. So this part that I'm going to talk to you about is going to be just a little bit about inmate discipline, right? Usually when you're in corrections and you start talking about inmate discipline, it's almost always about the writing or charging aspect. And so, yeah, that's definitely the biggest element of it. There's another element of it that I want to go over with real quick that's really simple. I just want to talk about it, and that's compliance, right? Ultimately, the one thing that we want from inmates is compliance. It's pure, it's simple, okay? We want an inmate, if he's in the day room or his cell or whatever, to be keeping his little area clean, the cell, the day room, or whatever. We want him to go to his programs. We want him to not be doing a bunch of STG gang stuff and, sharpening shanks or drinking liquor or any of those foul things, right? There's different ways to exert pressure on inmates. And the formal one, of course, is always the write-up or the charging document, depending on whether there's a chance it's going to go to court or to be screened in or out by the DA. All right. But some of the other pressures that you can bring to bear is just being in their business. All right. Inmates don't want you around. So the more that you're around a particular individual or group of individuals because they're calling out their own attention to you, the more pressure just by your presence alone that you can put on those individuals. Because when you're in their areas and doing things like, a little search here and there, checking out, some people left a bunch of, contraband on top of this. Who does this belong to, guys? No one's going to claim it, right? You're going to learn a lot of different little tricks like that you can pull off to make things uncomfortable for them so that you do get compliance. I tend to like for write-ups to be, either a last resort, if it's something, especially if it's something, simple, if it's some kind of low level disciplinary infraction. Some of the higher up things, some of the things that are, more serious that maybe constitute, misdemeanors or felonies of some sort, you're going to have no choice but to write them. But these other things, if you're always writing paperwork, all you're generally doing is passing the buck onto the next shift, all right? And they're having to deal with it because that paperwork means nothing sometimes to some of these fellows. Or you're creating a bunch of work for the people that have to hear it and find those individuals guilty. So we try and find ways to put pressure on inmates that doesn't rely on a write-up, if we can. Now, there's some circumstances, especially when you're new, where you might have to write them at the very beginning on stupid stuff just to get their attention. But don't let that become such a habit that that's the only tool that you have in your bag. And that's part of what talking to these guys and learning about them entails, because it allows you to find those little chinks in their armor that you can use to bring them back into line without it being a write-up or ending up in a use of force or something like that. Okay, so I just want you to keep that in mind. So with respect to, okay, once you're to that point where you have to write these guys, I got just a couple little things to, tell you that are really going to help, because we always want that write-up to stick, right? So what do? Provide all the elements of the crime, all right? Everything, whether it's trespassing, which in corrections often we have out of bounds, right? All right. There's elements to that. Those elements are the things that we have to take and that we have to show in our report. So you put all of them in, every element that proves that's a crime. All right. It's the same thing about theft. How do you prove that it was theft? Well, he wasn't supposed to have that on him. Well, do we know that he stole it then? Do we know for certain that someone didn't give it to him? We have to be able to prove those elements. So we have to be able to put those things in there. So this is part of critical thinking that I alluded to earlier, and we're going to touch on some more here in just a little bit in the very next segment, right? But you want to be able to take all of those elements and put them into that report. Everything, okay? You also want to be able to write out loopholes, all right? By write out loopholes, these guys, all right, you give a guy an order to do something and he just doesn't do it, whatever else happens, so you write him up over it, okay? And so you're telling exactly what happened, but you don't write out the loopholes. All right. What do I mean by loopholes? Well, maybe this guy, if he's been given an order, he says, I just do not speak English very well. All right. Maybe he just says he didn't understand, or he thought you meant something else. Be clear, concise, explicit. Make sure that you're able to put that. 3 times I asked him if he understood. He repeated the orders back to me so that I knew that he knew what I was talking about. So you have to write around those loopholes, whether you like it or not. Does it impact your report? Yeah, it makes it longer, but sometimes that's what we have to do to be able to, hook these guys in, be able to, actually make that write-up, have a feel for them so that it hurts them a little bit. All right. So the last thing I want to talk to you is about a word. And it's a really simple word, but I just want you to know what it means. And it might actually help you a little bit with this. And that's probative, or more specifically, probative value. So probative value, when you use that in a sentence, it just means that it tends to support the charge against the inmate. It just helps in some way. And that can be anyway. It can be everything from some smoking gun that guy's as guilty as hell to just some little other thing. For instance, all right, if you catch the guy lying and you make that clear in your report between whatever the different elements of the crime, of the charge are, all right, the fact that he lied goes a long ways toward proving what? Then he's probably guilty. Also, if he changes his story, does the fact that he changed his story the first time he told you X, the next time he told you Y, and the time after that he told you Z, what does that do? It bolsters the evidence against him. It has probative value. It tends to support the fact that he's not in the right. Something else is going on there. He's lying. He's changing his story. The other things that have probative value are eyewitnesses. If you have 3 or 4 eyewitnesses against this guy, other staff, and you put them in there, don't leave them out. All right. All that does what? Is probative value. It bolsters your case. Don't forget too about any physical evidence, whether it's a shank, whether it's a phone you found and it had his home phone number on it. That tends to bolster the fact that, hey, that phone is probably his, right? Because it has what? It has probative value. That piece of information has probative value. So these are all the things you want to put in there. Videos too. If your unit has, good video and it's something that you can use, and it shows, that inmate run across the court and punch, inmate B in the face. And, he would say, well, it was self-defense. All right. Does that video have probative value? Yes, it does. So these are all things I just want you to think about. It's not an exhaustive writing course that I'm trying to take you through here. It's the things that I'm trying to tell you that you need to know when you're new to think about. All right. Okay. So we're almost done. So I just wanted to take you through one little metaphor that I sometimes use, and then a few other little points here, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about between things like when I talk about the game of corrections and such. But one thing that I always compare corrections to is an onion. And if you imagine that you're a tiny little ant and you're on the outside of that onion, you're the new guy, right? And you know what? Every direction you go, all you see is that horizon, that skin of that onion, no matter what you do. All right. Because your perspective is limited because you haven't gained enough knowledge yet to be able to understand the depth of the layers that you're standing directly over. All right. So one thing that a guy taught me this a long time ago about my particular job was, he looked it up early on in his career in the penal code to see just what our powers were. You have probably some phenomenal powers if you're sworn. Even if you're not sworn, you probably have some pretty good statutory authority to do a lot of different things that are defined as your duties, so you can carry them out. I find all the time supervisors and managers, they're always afraid for us to flex and use those powers. Use them to the best of your ability. All right. Figure out what your powers are. Flex them out. Be able to go in there and be that impact player, not just sitting back, kind of, waiting for stuff to happen, not being proactive, just, observe and then respond instead of, preventing and preempting and being on top of things and, interrupting a critical incident. Be that individual, no matter how much extra responsibility you have to take on. In the end, it will make your career much more interesting. You'll be able to take a lot more pride in yourself. All right. So keep those things in mind. Know policy and procedure, right? The reason that you need to know policy and procedure is, number one, to keep yourself safe. Number two, to be able to write these guys up on the disciplinary infractions and so forth that you're catching them in. But also to be able to use for yourself if someone ever tries to tell you that you've done something wrong. No, I know policy and procedure. More than policy and procedure, I know the law. More than the law, I know case law. Do you know case law? Here's two for you to look up. Graham v. Connor and Tennessee versus Garner. Look those up, all right? I'm not going to do them here, but just start knowing that there's a lot of case law out there that impacts us and gives us a lot of broad discretion. Most of it's pretty good on our side of it. So just start thinking of those things. Start learning about it so that if something, questionable happens, you can fight your way out of it or write your way out of it. All right. Now I'm going to come last to what I think is one of the most important aspects of the job that new guys especially need to learn, because so often this is missing from a lot of what we do. We get so caught up in just having, I have my post orders and I have my desk area and I have a phone to call my sergeant. And that tends to be your little world, right? Well, if that's all your world is and you're not thinking critically, you can miss some big factors. All right. And this example that I'm going to give, I don't want you to focus on what the bad thing that the officer did in this situation is. I want you to focus on the critical thinking aspects. Anthony and I did this video on this just, I don't know, probably about a month ago or so. And it was just such a great example for being able to use critical thinking skills so that we're able to stop, prevent and preempt critical incidents. This particular scenario was just about an officer who misplaced his keys. Now that should never happen. But if it did, all right, and inmate goes, well, hey, I found him over here. All right. So the next part of the scenario that we were talking about is, should this officer tell on himself? Oh, yeah. And then what do we do? Do we give the inmate a big pat on the back? Are we using our critical thinking skills if that's what we're doing? What do our critical thinking skills tell us? First, they tell us that this inmate could be involved in doing something nefarious with those keys. What could he be doing? Could he be making, wax mold of them? Yeah. Is that a concern? Is that something we have to address? Damn right it is. All right. What else do we have to address? Could these keys have got him or someone else into an area they weren't supposed to be in? Yeah. What could that lead to? Could lead to an escape. Is that something that we should have to take into account? Right, it is. So now you're starting to see where critical thinking goes. All right. Does it also lead to what? Areas where there might be staff who have been what? Taken hostage, beaten, killed? Is that a concern for us? Right, it is. So what do we start doing? The first thing that we're doing is we're recalling everyone in the yard. All right. We're cuffing this guy up. He's going to SEG until the investigation is done, right? Are we worried about that? No, we have to get this thing lined out. We're going to have to count everyone, make sure that every inmate's accounted for because an escape didn't happen. We're also going to have to do what? We're going to have to account for every staff member on duty. All right. We're going to have to make sure that there were no breaches in the security. And then we're going to have to worry about whether he made any molds of those keys. All right. There are also a lot of other things that I'm not going to just deal with in that, but I'm just trying to show you how critical thinking works. It's not taking things at what? At face value. At face value? At surface value. At the surface value of the onion. Right? Because that's what most new people are used to. They're used to accepting and seeing things at face value because they're on the surface of that. They don't see the layers underneath. And this is what I'm trying to bring to you. I'm trying to bring to you critical thinking skills. All right. Critical thinking is being able to see likely bad possibilities. All right. Likely bad possibilities. If you're able to do that, you'll be able to put yourself in positions to stop people from getting hurt and killed or from escapes happening. All right. So that's what I'm hoping you're going to focus on. I hope that all you new guys will look at this and go, yeah, I've got to step up my game. If you're not quite into it yet, if you're just in the process, man, make sure that you're subscribed to Tier Talk. Make sure that your buddies are. When you go to your academy or whatever, tip them up to us. We'll appreciate it. We're here to help. Anyway, this is Russ Hamilton. Everyone, stay safe, stay frosty, stay aware. I'm signing out.